In this video, we'll be reviewing Unit 5 for Latin for Americans. In this unit, you'll learn the future of the third conjugation as well as the future for the third IO and the fourth. The future for the third conjugation and the third IO and the fourth is different from that of the first and second, which uses the Bo-Bis-Bit system. The future for the third IO and fourth just simply uses a vowel change. To form the future for the third conjugation, you take the present stem that you'd use for the present tense and you change the vowel. So pono becomes pona, but for the first singular you add an om, so it's ponam. And then instead of an I or a U, it's E, so it's pones, ponet, ponemus, ponetus, ponet. The future for the third I and fourth are exactly the same, and it's very similar to the future for the third. Instead of adding an A or an E, you add an IA for the first singular and an IE for the rest. Here's the future for the third IO and the fourth conjugation. So notice you keep the same present stem, except now you have an IAM for the first, IES, IET, IEMUS, IETIS, and IENT. Notice the fourth is exactly the same. The third tense is probably the hardest tense to learn because of the differences between the first, second, and the third IO, and fourth. Now we're going to learn the imperfect tense for all 5 conjugations. The imperfect tense is used for things that have happened in the past but shows duration, shows that something that hasn't really been completed. It's very similar, the formation of the imperfect tense is very similar to the way you form the future for the first and the second. The endings for the imperfect tense are the same for all 5 conjugations. It would be bom, bos, bot, bomus, botus, bont. What varies is the stem vowel that you put between for the present stem and the endings. For the first, it's going to be A. It's like porta bom. For the second, you'll use the stem vowel E. For the third, you'll use E as well. And then for the third IO and the fourth, you use IE and IE. Notice how it's translated. I was carrying. Other ways to translate are as I kept on carrying or I used to carry. The imperfect of sum is very similar to the future of sum, except using O is it, you're using A. So it's eram, eros, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. Notice the translation. I was, I used to be. Or I kept on being is another one. The perfect and the imperfect both are used for actions that have happened in the past. Here's some differences of how you translate them. In the perfect, the simple perfect is just the past tense. I came, or I have come, or I did come. For the imperfect, it's translated I was coming, I used to come, or I would come, or I kept on coming. And so in Latin, there are some areas of grades in the English. And so whether you use the imperfect or perfect, but it just depends on what the meaning of the author or the speaker is. If the speaker or author wants to show duration or it took some time or you did it continually, you use the imperfect. If you want to denote that it's just a completed action that was done once, you'd use the perfect. Here are some examples. The perfect. I saw John yesterday, compared to the imperfect. I saw John frequently. Again, showing that it happened multiple times. I went to camp last year. Imperfect. I used to go to camp every year, showing continual events. Did you ever play football? And so that would be perfect. And did you play football long? Imperfect. The alarm clock rang and I got up. The alarm clock kept ringing, but I stayed in bed. So notice with the imperfect, all these translations show something that a repeated action in the past or something that took a long time. And what is a long time is subjective to the author or to the speaker. Now we're going to introduce a voice. So before we've learned the active voice. The active voice is when the subject is doing the action. So the subject is doing the action of the verb. The subject is being active, you use the active voice. For the passive voice, the subject is being acted upon. The subject is being passive. If the subject is passive, you use the passive voice. This first example here, he is kicking. He is the subject and he is being active. He's doing the action, kicking the ball. The passive would be he is being kicked. So he is being acted upon by the horse. And so he's not doing the action. So this would be, being kicked would be a passive verb. His kicking is active. So the passive voice is formed in the present, imperfect, and future by simply changing the endings. Our normal endings are the O or M, S, T, MUS, TIS, and NT. However, in the passive voice, these endings change to R, RIS, TER, MER, MINI, and ENTOR. Notice how the vowel stays the same. There's one exception where the vowel will change, but for the most part, when you form the passive voice, you just simply change the endings, keeping the stem vowel the same. There's an exception down here for the third and third IO. Instead of having an I for the second singular, it becomes an E. It will remain an I in the fourth, but that's the only real exception where the vowel changes. For the third and third IO, second singular, the stem vowel becomes an E. So in the imperfect, again, the stem vowel stays the same, and you just change the bomb to a bar, bos to a baris, bot to a botor, bomus to a bomor, botis to a bomini, and a bont to a bontor. This is the same for all conjugations. And remember, in the imperfect, the only thing that changes is the stem vowel. Again, in the future, all you do is you change the endings, and I just want to note that here's the other exception, where the I becomes an E. So in the first conjugation or second conjugation future, it's not beris with an I, it's beris with an E. But other than that, all you're doing is changing the endings. For the third IO, and fourth, again, you keep the stem vowel the same and you just change the endings. So the only time the stem vowel changes is when it's in the future for the first or second, or the present, second singular, for the third or third IO. So the difference between transitive and intransitive verbs. Transitive verbs are verbs that generally take a direct object, so that they're actually acting upon something. And so generally only transitive verbs are used in the passive voice. Intransitive verbs, which are often not used in the passive voice or not at all, usually do not take a direct object. The ablative agent is often used with the passive voice. An agent comes from the word ago, meaning a doer. And so this is used with the preposition a or ob when you're dealing with a person or animal. If it's not a person or animal, generally the a or ob is not written. But the ablative agent is the preposition that says who is doing the action. So for example, the battle is never begun by the neighboring people. So by the neighboring people would be the ablative of agent, and that's who is never beginning the battle. Letters will never be written nor read by many. By many right here is your ablative of agent. It's who's not reading or writing the letters. He will be protected by stout armor. The protecting is being done by the armor. That is your ablative agent, and that is translated with an a or ob for a person or an animal, but when it's not a person or animal, notice how the a or ob is omitted. Another ablative is the ablative of accompaniment. So this is always used with the preposition cum. And so the ablative of accompaniment is when you're doing something with somebody. So for example, ablative of accompaniment is down here. He fights with the man, so he's accompanying him here. This example up here, he fights with a man, this would be an ablative of means. It's how he's fighting. He's using the man as a weapon. Here in this example, he's fighting with him, along with him. And so examples is come with me. Anna is with the teacher and walk with us. Anytime you use an ablative of accompaniment, you use the preposition cum with the ablative. Quick ablative review. The ablative of means does not have a preposition, and it's translated in English with or by. The ablative of accompaniment uses the preposition cum and translated with the preposition with. The ablative of agent is used a or ob when you're talking with a person or animal, and is translated as by. Remember, if it's not a person or animal, you can omit the a or the ob. You can turn adjectives into adverbs. So the way you turn an adjective into an adverb, like taking clear and making it clearly, is by taking off the us and adding an e. So liber, free, becomes freely by adding an e, and beautiful becomes beautifully by adding an e. So it's simply, you take the adjective and you remove the us and you add an e. If there is not a us at the end, like liber and pulcher, you just simply add an e. Idioms are figures of speech whose meaning is lost when translated when it's word for word into another language. Here are some examples of some Latin idioms. Gratias ago, which would be I thank you. Gratiam habeo, which would be to feel grateful, generally taking the dative. Vitam ago is to live a life. Bellum gero is to wage war. Castra pono is to pitch camp. Vina munio is to build a road. Verba facio is to speak or make a speech. Memoria teneo is to remember. And concilium copium is to adopt a plan. Now let's review the vocab from this unit. As you look across the list, there's nothing special here. The one thing you might want to note is that poeta is AE masculine. So this follows the same pattern as agricola and nata, being part of the first declension but masculine. Other than that, anything that ends in A is going to be AE feminine, US is going to be I masculine, and UM is going to be I neuter. Your adjectives, there's nothing special here. They're going to all be us, the us you'll do for masculine, using the second declension masculine. The will be for feminine, using the first declension. And the is for neuter, using the second declension neuter. When reviewing verbs, pay special attention to what conjugation it belongs to. Walio, since it's EO, is easy to identify as second conjugation. Same with continuo from this list. Now you look at your IOs. The easy to identify are the fourth. So audio is fourth. Convenio, since it comes from venio, is also fourth. I believe those are all fourths on our list. And then the remaining IOs will be third IO. Officio from facio is third IO. Incipio is from capio, third IO. And now fugio is also third IO. Now I'm left with just the O endings, and I have to decide if it's first or second. Excuse me, I mean first or third. So, appello is first. Convoco from voco is also first. Propero is first. And then the remaining ones are third. Committos from mitto, that's third. Dico is third. Gero is third. Ligo is third. Scribo is third. And trajo is third. Your adverbs and preposition, ita is so, numquam is never, cum means with, and it takes the ablative. And your conjunctions, ot is or, ot, ... ot would be either or, et ... et is both and, nec or nec is neither, and neque is neither nor. The enclectic que, when you put in on the second word, in a series would mean and.